The Escapist has 1.2 million subscribers on YouTube. Clearly, his opinions are valuable and sought after. One of his opinions is that games as a service is incompatible with art. His core argument seems to be that there's no fixed point in time in which a game is done, and as such, it's not possible to analyse that game as art. He applies the same logic to franchises that seem to continue on endlessly, like Star Wars.
The philosophers can debate this to the heavens, but in my view, the problem with both live services and franchises never being allowed to die is that art is arguably defined by criticism and analysis, and you can't properly analyse something until it has stopped moving.
We'll come back to this argument in a moment. First, I want to address what seems to be a secondary argument made by the Escapist. He's concerned about it making game publishers lazy, shipping games that are not finished or are buggy. This makes it hard for a reviewer like him, but also for a player to know when to jump in. When is it done?
Then there's No Man's Sky, which I had to do another review of recently because it had changed so much since the initial review. For the better, sure, and good for No Man's Sky. But I want to review a game, not a point on a line graph.
I agree with the quality part of this argument. When a game is complete enough to be released, it should be enjoyable and a complete experience. There are certainly too many games out there that are shipped in an incomplete state, but this is not a problem of games as a service. It's a problem of digital delivery of games. I don't feel this secondary point is relevant here, but I do think it deserves a discussion of its own. This brings us back to the main point that the Escapist is making. He asserts that because a live services game is continually updated, it has no ability to tell a story or carry a message. Here's what he says about Fortnite.
No stance is taken, no higher themes are explored.
The Escapist maintains that this is because the focus of the development team is on an environment in which new content can be developed and sold, rather than on a coherent world with a narrative. This results in disjointed content. In contrast, he believes BioShock is an example of how it should be done. Here's what he has to say about the message in BioShock's story.
Failure of objectivism in practice, about how free will is inherently antithetical to utopia.
However, I think the Escapist is missing a very important point here. Fortnite is not trying to be art, and this is okay. It's a mindless bit of fun. It's a social experience. Some would even claim it's a sport. Is football art? No, it's a sport. What the Escapist seems to be saying is that only games that are art can be considered valuable. If a game doesn't have a higher purpose than entertaining, if it doesn't have a meaning and a purpose beyond pure fun, then it has no value. I can't agree with this. If the claim was that Fortnite is not art, then maybe I'd react differently. But to claim that this proves games as a service is incompatible with art is far too much of a leap for me. There is space in the world for fun and triviality, as well as art. And in fact, art can be fun and trivial. However, this alone doesn't discount the Escapist's core point that games as a service is inherently incompatible with art. It simply means that he's being too hard on games that aren't actually trying to be the kind of art that he is referring to.
Is games as a service really incompatible with art?
Let's consider two art forms that are firmly established: music and stand-up comedy. Today we consume music in electronic form. This brings us a finished product. But go back in time. Originally, there was no way to record music. If you wanted to listen to some music, you needed at least one musician in the room with you. They would play for you once, and that particular rendition would never be heard again. Even today, many artists are predominantly live acts. The set changes from night to night. The banter between songs is personalized to that audience. The tempo of songs will vary. New songs written on the bus earlier in the day might be tried out on a live audience. The bum notes will fall in different places. By the Escapist's argument, live music is not art. A live performance is merely a point on a line graph. Stand-up comedians are similar. The idea that they jump on stage and deliver the same set every night is clearly false. Not only will they adapt their material to the audience present each night, but they don't sit at home and write an entire set that they then take out on the road. They test each joke with audiences. They tweak the timing, the rhythm of the words, the hand gestures and the facial expressions. They refine the joke until it is truly ready, and then they take it on stage as part of their biggest performance of the year. By the Escapist's argument, this is not art because there are day one patches to every joke the comedian tells. My own position is not that there is an incompatibility, but that there is an opportunity for artists to deliver new art forms that leverage the games as a service infrastructure. For example, why not create a game world that continues to exist and evolve in the absence of the player, one in which the impact of one player's actions permeate through the whole world? A world in which the loss of an object is permanent for all players and, critically, the creation of an object is also permanent. A world in which artists create and perform. With careful curation, the creators of such a world could ensure that the story continues to evolve as the inhabitants of that world arrive, influence, and leave. This would be a franchise that never died, but with an ever-changing and ever-evolving set of storytellers within.
There has to be a way to fix this.
Aligning to reality. 6, 5, 9.
Subplots would play out on their own, emerging from the artists that chose this world as their medium. This already happens for existing art and games, even some games as a service. Fan art, including storytelling, is a thing. What if fan art were a part of the game world? What if the fan art could, if players engage with it, influence the progression of the in-game story? By injecting new characters and new world events, the artists who develop and curate such a world could tell a continually evolving story. Our games today are limited by the creativity of those who create the games. In a world that can continue to evolve, the pool of artistic energy can never be depleted. This would be a world in which art is core to the experience. Is this a utopian vision? No doubt some people will tell stories of how such a world would become dysfunctional. I choose not to accept such an outcome as inevitable. In fact, this is not only something that is possible, but it is something that has been with us for nearly 20 years already. We'll come back to that soon. Before we go there, we need to think a little bit about who pays for these worlds. All artists need a mechanism to reach their audience. Games are one means in which art forms that are designed to entertain can be delivered. In this video, I'm focusing on games, but it is important that we don't limit our thinking to just games. Computers are capable of so much more than games.
Free-to-play games are more profitable.
The fact is that free-to-play games, at least today, can be more profitable than traditional paid games. More and more publishers are starting to see the benefits of this model. Free-to-play games can be more profitable because they have a lower barrier to entry. This means that more people are willing to try them out, and if they like the game, they'll be more likely to spend money on in-game purchases. If the games do not meet their goals, be that an artistic experience, piece of fun, or a sport, then players will not engage and the game will not succeed. This model is also beneficial for developers, as it allows them to continuously update and improve their games. Ironically, this continual improvement is one of the things the Escapist does not like. However, successful games as a service titles tend to have a longer lifespan than traditional pay-to-play games. This is almost certainly because of the continuing updates which generate additional revenue. It's true that single-fee games can be, and sometimes are, updated for years. However, this is extra cost for no additional value, per existing player, to the publisher. This is simply not economically viable unless you happen to be attracting new players to the game. Even then, the benefit is limited to the market that has not yet purchased. The answer, therefore, is to offer downloadable content. But at the core, how's this different to games as a service? It's an additional expense to get the latest optional content in the game. Furthermore, as games move increasingly online to provide shared experiences, the model of single payment means that there are ongoing variable costs for the publisher for every player that continues to play the game. A player who plays for 1 hour pays the same as one who plays for 100 hours. This model incentivizes a publisher to produce a game that is good enough or hyped enough to sell millions of copies on day one, but not to actually worry about the quality to bring longevity. This leads to the problem of released games being substandard. If a publisher decides in a late stage of development that the game will not be a mega hit, then it may be considered time to grab as much cash as possible and run. I'm not suggesting game publishers actually plan to release bad games that they'll kill shortly after launch. This is not a way to build a long-term business, but the pursuit of profit does lead to some strange decisions. Taking the money of a few million players at launch and then killing the project may be less damaging than killing it before it's released.
So games as a service is okay.
Since games as a service is a more economically viable model, I believe games as a service is a necessary model, but that does not mean that I'm supportive of games as a service as it stands today. Monetization in free-to-play games usually comes in the form of loot boxes and pay-to-win mechanics. Loot boxes are a way for publishers to cynically exploit their audience by offering them a chance to win rare and valuable items in exchange for real money. Consequently, they're often seen as a form of gambling. As such, they prey on people's greed and hope for a quick and easy way to earn rewards. This can ultimately lead to players spending more money than they can afford and can even lead to an addiction in some cases. Some games avoid the gambling risk by offering the ability to buy specific items. This is often criticized for being pay-to-win mechanics, as they give players who are willing to spend money an unfair advantage over those who aren't. This can create a very unbalanced and unfun game experience. However, there are games, such as League of Legends, that have managed to provide a non-gambling and equitable free-to-play model. Players can buy items in League of Legends, but they do not give them a higher chance of winning. They simply personalize the player's characters in-game. Players can purchase characters with specific skills, but because the game is played in teams and game balance is brought about by matching different characters, it is usually possible for opposing players to counter any advantages from purchased characters.
Games as a service done right.
I'm not supportive of the exploitative model of games as a service, but the model itself is not inherently wrong. If I continue to get value from something and my enjoyment of that thing is incurring additional costs for the provider, then I am happy to continue to pay for it. We do this every day. Our streaming service subscriptions are perhaps the easiest to picture, but there are many more. I'm a subscriber to a number of people on Patreon. By the way, I have a Patreon too. I make payments via Ko-fi. I toss a few coins into the busker's hat each time I pass and she makes me smile. What I don't do is expect to turn up at my favourite restaurant and eat for free just because I ate there last month too. I don't expect Iron Maiden to send me a free ticket to their next gig because I paid to see them play Number of the Beast decades ago. And I don't expect to see the second in a trilogy of art house shorts for free because I paid for the first. There is no other part of life where we expect to pay once and get endless updates and enjoyment from that payment. We do, however, expect something different each time we pay. This expectation of additional payment does not diminish the value of the art in those environments, so it doesn't need to do so in games. Earlier, I suggested that the answer is to provide an ever-evolving and living environment. My problem with games as a service today is that this evolution of the world is entirely managed by the publisher. They control what goes into the world, and for the most part, they control how the money flows. Artistic creativity is limited to what the publishers want to deliver, and all too often their goal is to create more and more content for people to impulse buy. This is at the core of the escapist argument, and I'm supportive. However, I think this is a short-termist view, and I like to play the long game. There are a number of proposed models in which we can ensure that the individual artists can be directly paid for their work. These models cut out the current intrusive but necessary suits who currently ensure that everyone gets paid. We also have models that enable massive productions that are collaborations across hundreds if not thousands of artists. Exploring these models is beyond the scope of this video. Perhaps I'll dive into it into a future one. Here, I want to remain focused on the games as a service business model. But before I do, I think it's important that we explore a point raised by one of my generous patrons. Not only does Barack Dub help me buy coffee, but they also commented on an early draft of this article, and as always they made excellent points. Barack Dub said, "I wouldn't want to see the end of crafted single-player games. I prefer to think of them as interactive narratives. There's a lot to be said for a strong author's voice, and being taken through a predefined story arc, as opposed to the free-form anarchy of sandboxed, user-generated content. Storytelling has been going on since we all sat around a campfire, and although the medium has changed, I think we still have an innate need for having a shaman-like figure rework and retell our archetypal stories. I fully agree with this point. There certainly remains a space for fully authored storytelling. My case below is for a broadening of storytelling possibilities, not a removal of the shaman-like figure. Just as our storytelling has evolved with the introduction of new mediums such as theatre, books, radio, movies, TV, and now computer games, I believe we can create new mediums as described below. These are a complement to, not a replacement of what went before. So, what are these new mediums? Consider what would happen if the focus was on creating an evolving world with a managed storyline, but with a significant amount of agency that allowed the inhabitants of that world to create an influence within it. What would emerge?
Second Life.
Second Life has been around for nearly 20 years and manages to achieve this. It's a world that exists in the cloud and is inhabited by avatars controlled by real people. It's a place where people can be whoever they want to be and do whatever they want to do. Second Life is a home to a thriving economy with its own currency and a marketplace where users can buy and sell goods and services. In many ways, Second Life is like a real world, but without the constraints of gravity or the need for food and water. In Second Life, people can purchase areas of land and can build whatever they want there. There are recreations of role-playing games, social clubs, historical scenes, destroyed monuments, fictional worlds, museums, meeting rooms, educational workshops, and more. There are believed to be over 27,000 regions, with over 70 million registered accounts, growing at an estimated 350,000 a month. This results in an average of around 40,000 concurrently active users. Second Life creators have reported to have cashed out $80 million in the year up to mid-2021. These are not huge numbers when compared to places like Facebook, but for a fully immersive three-dimensional world that contains lots of true art, it's pretty impressive. Because of the ability to cash out money from the Second Life economy, there are in fact people who have their jobs in Second Life, not the real world. These include developers, real estate agents, and critically for this article, artists.
Is Second Life art?
Second Life itself is not art. It's an environment in which art can be created. It's also not a game. It's an environment in which a game can be created. There are regions in Second Life that showcase art, and there are areas that deliver a gaming experience. I bring Second Life here as an example of how games as a service can evolve from a mindless delivery of loot boxes to true art. Consider what would happen if there is another way to monetize game worlds. What if publishers could bring creativity into their worlds, build economies in which creators can build art of true value that is available to others within that world? Would we see comedy clubs and music venues sprouting up in-game? Why couldn't actors develop their characters in role-playing games? Could artists create and sell digital paintings for hanging on the walls of online and real world? Could individuals watch a live performance of a Shakespearean play, or hear the latest jokes of the up-and-coming comedians, or even the most popular comedian of the day? Would bands stream live gigs into the online world? Would games evolve to include deeply artistic content incorporating some or all of these elements? Would games become life? This, of course, is the promise of the Metaverse. The current proponents of the Metaverse have a different vision than those of the Second Life creators, but that discussion will have to wait for another day. This video is already pretty long.
Conclusion.
In conclusion, for me, games as a service is an economic model, not a set of constraints placed on game delivery. The Escapist does a great job of pointing out what is wrong with games as a service today. But what we see today is barely even the start. I would rather look at where we could go and do my little bit to get us there. What about you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm looking for an education. Help me get it.